I'll be the first to admit that horror has never really been my thing. It's not that I can't mentally endure horror media, as much as it sounds like hope, but rather I never fully understood its appeal. Of course, no diss to horror and its extremely dedicated fanbase, but given my fairly limited experience with the genre, I've always felt horror was more appealing as a complementary theme over something that took center stage. It wasn't until recently that opinion of mine was challenged by a horror anime of the name Dark Gathering. And to get straight to the point, I get it. It may not be the hardcore horror experience that diehard fans are looking for, but I think it has something of value to offer to both people who enjoy the genre and to those who may traditionally be a bit put off by it. So with that being said, I want to take the time to talk about everything that makes this anime so goddamn great, from its unique approach to horror to the incredibly fleshed out trio of protagonists. Horror fan or not, by the end of this video I'll hopefully have you convinced to throw Dark Gathering onto your already overflowing catalog of media you'll totally watch later. Without further ado,
let's go!
in its most basic form, Dark Gathering is a spirit-hunting horror anime following our aforementioned trio of spiritually sensitive protagonists, Keitaro Gentoga, Eiko Hizaki, and her younger cousin, Yayoi. The show takes on a Spirit of the Week format, where the group must work together to capture and collect powerful spirits to assist in taking down an even greater evil, with each character having their own personal motivation for doing so. It's like Pokemon, except they're ghosts. They're ghosts. They're all ghosts. It's of course a lot more nuanced than that, but I promise we'll get into those finer details in just a bit. We're first introduced to college freshman Keitaro Gentoga as he sets out to begin a brand new life for himself. Living pretty much his entire youth as a sort of spiritual magnet, sensing and attracting the supernatural around him, his life growing up was never quite normal. But it wasn't until a harrowing spiritual encounter that turned Keitaro's life for the worse. Afflicted with a powerful curse, forcing him to cover the hair-like nerves on his hand at all times, of which a close friend of his was also dragged into and affected by, spiraled Keitaro into a bottomless pit of guilt and despair. Deathly afraid to cause any more harm to those around, Keitaro spent just over 2 years socially isolated in his own room. It was only in thanks to the support of his friends and family that pushed Keitaro out of this destructive and reclusive lifestyle. With a newfound hatred for all things supernatural, we follow Keitaro in his earliest steps to reintegrate back into society and fight for the life he once had, with this fresh start being everything to him. He takes the recommendation from a close childhood friend of his, Eiko Hizaki, to become a private night tutor, as an additional means to exercise his social skills. It just so happens, in a cruel twist of fate, that his first pupil is a little girl who's not only obsessed with the supernatural, but can see into the spirit world as well. By what seems like sheer coincidence, this little girl is Eiko's younger cousin, Yayoi Hizaki, whom Eiko has been taking care of after a tragic accident left Yayoi all on her own. Tutor session after tutor session, Keitaro is dragged by the overenthusiastic pair from one life-threatening haunted location to another. As it turns out, Yayoi is a surprisingly skilled exorcist, purposely seeking and imprisoning any hostile spirit she encounters. She hopes to use these spirits' collective powers to track and take down the specter that kidnapped her late mother's soul, and Keitaro's spiritual attraction proves useful in drawing said spirits to her. While at first Keitaro was unwillingly roped into Yayoi's beyond dangerous adventures, upon understanding her situation and learning that she may be able to help free him and Eiko, the previously unspecified cursed friend, of their curse, a reluctant and unlikely partnership is born. With his resolve being tested at every turn, Keitaro must confront his trauma head-on as he's thrusted deeper and deeper into the dark world of the occult. I think something that this anime did quite well, that often goes underappreciated, is the approach Dark Gathering took to set up its fairly complex plot, characters, and world. Though both us and Keitaro are immediately thrown into the swing of things, important narrative information is still given at a digestible pace, without overwhelming the viewer through heavily loaded exposition dumps. From one episode to the next, I was continually surprised by Dark Gathering's creativity and continuity. I like that there's a feeling of logical development throughout the anime, as can be seen throughout Keitaro's character transformation and the gradually increasing power level of Yayoi's arsenal of spirits. With a clearly defined game plan and end goal, it keeps the anime's start to finish progression from feeling either aimless or unpurposeful. You'd be surprised at how many stories fail to achieve even that. Despite all Dark Gathering's supernatural elements, the world within the anime feels grounded, which helps sell the whole horror part of its narrative. Though, through the clips I've been using of the show thus far, I won't blame anyone for feeling underwhelmed by its use of the horror tag. It may not look the part, but I promise said tag is rightfully earned. The sheer intensity felt throughout our trio's escapades, as the threat of death is constantly imminent and impartial, brings out an indescribable chill, only achieved in thanks to the anime's immersive and engaging style of storytelling. It doesn't have to rely on cheap tricks like jump scares to invoke fear either, as Dark Gathering does a fantastic job building narrative tension through its various haunted locations and associated urban legends. These disturbing tales of tragedy and sheer brutality are already enough to leave you feeling uneasy, whilst having just the right amount of mystery to elevate these stories to the next level, assisted by glorious sound design and soundtrack. Even if I didn't feel scared at all times. That truly unsettling and thrill-inducing atmosphere is definitely worth praising. That may be surprising to hear when you take a casual glance at this anime's visual style, but even then, I think it kind of fits for the type of show this is. Because in between all the grotesque, creepy, and weird, Dark Gathering is above all else a ton of fun. While not exclusive to Dark Gathering, that's something I think helps set this anime apart from other, more traditional horrors in its medium. Its wacky and goofy sense of humor. It may seem like a poor fit from how I described the show thus far, but I find Dark Gathering weaves between comedy and horror in a way that works to the anime's advantage. The show likes to use comedy to put the viewer in a false sense of security, getting them to lower their guard. This helps emphasize the horror when it inevitably hits. And once you become accustomed to this technique, it makes those fun moments carry this uneasiness and suspense that wasn't there before. There's of course the concern of humor in bad times, devaluing how seriously we take these darker moments. But thankfully, the anime rarely falls victim to this. If anything's going to do that, I think it might be the visual quality. Don't get me wrong. I like the anime's general art direction for how it complements/reflects both the silly and dark sides of its narrative. Some may feel a more standard horror style would suit the show better, but I think it's an interesting and fitting contrast, even if their killer outfits sorta break my immersion at times. But when that's all said and done, yeah, its visuals by anime standards are pretty par for the course. Trust me, it's not a deal breaker, but the horror would definitely benefit from better visual quality. Thankfully, as previously established, Dark Gathering's most notable strengths come from its narrative foundation. This was an incredibly faithful adaptation, so I don't really mind. Another strength of the anime is its world building. Most if not all places our crew visits are based on real-world haunted locations, with their own slew of urban legends the anime takes inspiration from. I've really come to love these scary stories sprinkled throughout the anime's episodes. Though the manner they were told was pretty blatantly forced, the contents within them are more than worthwhile. I like how we get a window into the various spirits' lives before they've died, and how their fate shaped the type of spirit they became. These tales often also explore the absolute worst sides of human nature, which are then reflected through the personalities of the spirits themselves, and usually manifested as that spirit's powers, strengths, and weaknesses. Every spirit, whether they be crossed accidentally or purposely sought out, was distinct from the next, which made each encounter uniquely entertaining from one another. I also found the power system and rules regarding the spirit realm to be intriguing as well. When a person dies, that soul moves on to the spirit realm. By default, these spirits will eventually pass on, as a soul needs energy to stay in the realm of spirits. This energy is mostly equivalent to power, and is something that is gradually lost over time. However, there are some souls who refuse to move on to the afterlife, usually due to a grievance they have yet to let go of, choosing vengeance over eternal rest. To continue lingering on, they need more energy, which can be obtained by consuming another spirit. More energy equals more power, and once you have some power, it's a lot easier to get more. So things get strangely territorial for those higher tiered spirits. The promise of and thirst for power is how Yayoi motivates the spirits that fight for her. I'll talk more about her elaborate system later though. Minor detail that the energy of spirits who get consumed don't die. Their energy just gets merged with whoever consumed them. So there's some additional incentive to avoid the big guys if you plan on passing naturally. While spirits can't always interact with the human realm, sometimes those two worlds will intersect, allowing evil spirits to do harm to the living. After all, their souls make for easy prey. And don't even get me started on the threat of human possession, that's where things get really messy. Keitaro's unique circumstances make it so he's targeted by vengeful spirits more than others. But even with prior preparation, no one is truly safe. That's mainly what makes the spirit hunting part of this anime so good. With the anime stakes, Yayoi and Ko really have to earn their power and work as a team. To make matters even harder, there's potential repercussions with the spirits they choose to fight with too, whether it be unavoidable friendly fire or threat of going rogue. There's serious demand for on-the-fly problem solving, so seeing how they overcome those challenges helps keep the action interesting. Yayoi can feel like a bit of a deus ex at times, but rarely do I feel her sudden intervention robs the group of a satisfying victory. And hey, those spirit battles are pretty damn entertaining on their own. Dark Gathering does a great job keeping me curious and invested in its world, though sometimes the story leaves me with more questions than answers. For example, I'd love to better understand the public's general perception of this subject of spirits, curses, and the like. Because even though this version of Japan closely mirrors our own, I feel the story world is far too outwardly paranormal for it to be commonly not believed. Admittedly, some intricacies of the narrative feel a bit contrived logically. Sometimes things just work because. For the most part, this is something that can be excused by the suspension of disbelief supernatural shows require, but again, more details where necessary would help in those kind of circumstances. This anime has other weak spots too. Narrative progression can feel dramatically cliche, sometimes combat ends in anticlimactic fashion, the existence of proxies, while necessary, can sometimes completely kill the sense of danger characters are in. It honestly depends on the episode, etc. I think the good heavily outweighs what I don't care for, but that's mainly because I like Dark Gathering's general direction. Next to Dark Gatherings approach the horror. The main trio of characters are probably the anime's next biggest strength, particularly because they do a lot with what seems like very little. Despite my first impressions, Keitaro, Yayoi, and Eiko are not shallow leads. They're characters with meaningful depth and complexity, who develop just as the show does. Let's take Keitaro for instance. Keitaro starts the story as someone truly quite pitiful. Him just exiting his phase of recluse means he's someone who's severely socially handicapped, as can be reflected through his early on-screen interactions. Not to mention, he still hasn't fully recovered from his supernatural trauma. Considering everything, I imagine there's a fair share who may be peeved by Keitaro's initial characterization. In his worst moments, he's someone who invokes a ton of frustration, especially when his incompetence and self-doubt constantly land him in danger. Anime is no stranger to bumbling crybaby protagonists, and given the type of show this is, Keitaro could very easily fit into that mold. However, the nice thing about a character with flaws is that they have the potential to grow past them. One of the best parts about Keitaro's character is how he actively puts in meaningful effort to grow as an individual to overcome the aspects of himself holding him back. We see Keitaro's growth as he learns to handle his supernatural sensitivity, rebuild his confidence, and come out of his shell as he slowly regains the social skills he once had. It's not an instant transformation, so some might call it too little too late. But as episodes go by, there's a satisfying and noticeable change felt in his character. That pace of progression really helps humanize Keitaro, which does wonders for his likability as a protagonist. And to be completely honest, I don't blame Keitaro for being scared either. I get why he takes the danger of the supernatural very seriously. His trauma, mixed with the target he has on his back at all times, makes his fear feel human more than anything else. Not saying all decisions he makes are perfectly logical, but even the simplest course of action can turn impossible when you're in a state of confused panic. So I think it's a bit unfair to backseat him in those more extreme circumstances, because to be honest, I doubt most people in real life would do better. Keep in mind, Keitaro's situation is complicated. He has no obligation to help Yayoi. If he doesn't want anything to do with the supernatural, Keitaro can step away anytime he'd like. His hand may be inconvenient, but it's not the end-all be-all. It's shown he has methods to strategically diminish its effects. So what's the big dilemma? The promise of working towards the removal of his curse sounds enticing until you realize what that path entails. The working theory is to remove Keitaro's curse, they need the assistance from a spirit with the power level of a god, in order to take down the spirit who cursed Keitaro in the first place. Not impossible to acquire, but to achieve, they must gradually hunt more and more powerful entities in increasingly dangerous haunted locations. locations. The non-stop, trauma-inducing, near-death experiences are enough on their own, but the threat of being put under another, even worse curse could destroy any hope Keitaro has to lead a normal life once and for all. There's a lot at stake here, especially when you consider more than just Keitaro could get harmed. Given they're not completely sure that Yayoi's method would cure him, it makes this whole escapade one hell of a gamble. Keitaro understands that risk. He internalizes it. However, that small glimmer of hope, something he never thought he'd have to save himself, Eiko, and their future, is enough to give him the courage to push forward. Him and Yayoi may want different things, but at the end of the day, they require the same solution. So beyond empathy, I think it makes sense why he helps her out. After all, Keitaro is someone who wants to use his spiritual sensitivity for good. This gives him the opportunity to do just that. With the added support of those around him, no matter the danger, Keitaro won't be giving up anytime soon. The only question now is whether he'll remain sane by the end of it all. Only time will tell. Starting the story defenseless, with little to no experience on how to capture or exercise a spirit, he definitely weighs the others down. I wouldn't go as far as to call him useless though, because he's more than a walking plot device. Just like everything else, those skills are something he learns with time, and in the end, Keitaro does prove his worth. Even if it takes a while, there's meaningful payoff, with even more opportunity for growth as the story progresses. The only thing I wanted from Keitaro that we didn't get in the anime's 25 episodes is more insight on his backstory / curse. We have just enough context to understand the gravity of his situation and rationalize his thought process, but the specifics are unknown. From what I understand, that reveal is something being built up to, so I won't dwell on it too much. Moving on to Yayoi, my personal favorite lead. Yayoi tragically lost her parents a year and a half before moving in with Eiko, due to a horrible spirit-caused car accident. In the mess of it all, one of the last things she saw was her mother's soul being dragged away by a giant embryo-like spirit, later dubbed the Spectre of Death. Her head injury from the accident skyrocketed Yayoi's cognitive ability, allowing her to see both the material and spirit realm at the same time. Her double vision was pre-existing, but she could only flip between the two one at a time, nor did she fully understand the phenomenon of what she was experiencing. After the accident though, everything began to click. This is where her obsession with the supernatural began. Between her recovery and encounter with Keitaro, Yayoi mastered the art of exorcism and all things spirit hunting. Her enemy is a monster who won't listen to reason, so she's quite literally willing to do anything to achieve victory, be it morally good or bad. Because the Spectre is too powerful for her to take down on her own, she's building an army of spirits to empower herself, using the grudges of the dead to pursue a grudge far greater. That's the crux of it anyways. The details surrounding how she learned what she learned are unfortunately glossed over. Not that it really matters. Yayoi has this air of mystery surrounding her, so we're working with just about as much context Keitaro has. But it'd be cool to see a bit of that missing space filled in somewhere eventually. Given her on-screen behavior, it's easy to forget just how tragic of a character Yayoi is, essentially giving up her childhood to dedicate her life to revenge, forced to grow up to overcome her personal burdens. Yayoi being the most mature of the three is as funny as it is sad in that context. Keep in mind, excluding her spirits, she was fighting this battle all by herself, which even she admits made her feel lonely. Thankfully, she no longer has to carry those grievances alone, now motivated by more than just her missing mother, but by her friends. Her goals extend to ridding every evil spirit in Japan. Extremely ambitious? Yeah. However, if it means she can help those who can still be saved, then to her, it'll all be worth it. But you know, it's not that serious. Sad? What? No, look how silly she is. Oh my god. Sorry for the harsh segue. There's just so much to love about Yayoi's character. For one, I absolutely adore her outfit. The goofy oversized jacket and shoes are peak character design. And while I originally found the skull eyes to be a bit tacky, they quickly grew on me. I like how the double pupils are plot relevant too. That helped a lot. Yayoi doesn't outwardly show a lot of emotion, so you may assume for her to be the distant, cold-hearted type. But as you get to know Yayoi, you'll learn that she's actually a pretty chill person. That personality of hers meshes really nicely with both Keitaro and Eiko. In action, she's a lot of fun to watch too. She's tactical, surprisingly agile, and astonishingly intelligent, with a great understanding of her limits. Using her superhuman ability to outwit her prey is half of what makes these ghost hunting ventures so entertaining. She may get a little too carried away with some of her ideas, but Yayoi pulls off that insanity in a really adorable way. Another cool thing about Yayoi is her vast collection of spirits and her relationship to them. When it comes to hunting spirits, the ends justify the means. She'll take in the worst of the worst if it means it marginally increases her chances of coming out on top. Yayoi is sympathetic in the fact that she knows not all spirits are evil, but at the same time, her methods can be seen as cruel and merciless. To capture a spirit, she tortures and forces them to possess one of her many plushies. Every plushie has a physical piece of her inside them, be it hair, nails, blood, etc., transforming the plush into a proxy. Anything that would harm Yayoi harms the proxy instead. In a way, you can think of them as extra lives. Now, here's the neat part. She has a lot of proxies, and the vengeful spirits inside them absolutely loathe Yayoi. Understandably so. As badly as some may want to attack her, if she gets hurt, every other proxy suffers as consequence. So through mutually assured destruction, they keep one another in check. It's why she's able to enter her room without immediately being torn apart. The sheer number form a nigh impenetrable defense, and their consumption of other spirits unfit to join her army gradually strengthens their offensive power. However, between deliberate aggravation and internal competition, at the cost of all her weaker proxies, eventually that power converges into one graduated entity. A proxy with power so great, she has to lock them somewhere far away as she can't safely contain them within a room. Those graduated spirits are primarily the ones that are used in combat, though controlling them after the fact is a whole separate endeavor. Not that all proxies are forced too, some are contractual, their power for her assistance with who knows what. I think that's a really cool dynamic the show explores well, but for time's sake, I'll leave that topic be. There's something oddly charming about seeing these plushies containing all-powerful entities quake in fear of this little girl, knowing full well she's in total control. The proxies might be a bit overpowered in practice, but the sheer power of the spirits they fight later make it so the weight of the stakes are still upheld. I know Yayoi being the ultimate safety net may rub others the wrong way, but at the end of the day, I personally feel her role in the show is perfectly fine the way it is. Last but not least, we have Eiko, which you may have noticed that up to this point is someone I've been strangely quiet about. I promise this was for good reason because, oh my god, I have some things to say about this character. Eiko is someone a lot of people will either love or absolutely hate. On the outside, she's the extroverted and popular type, intelligent with an infectiously bright and bubbly personality. Most notable about her though is her obsessive love with all things horror, and that love is likely why she was also a victim in Keitaro's incident. One of her main motivations throughout the story is to find the logic/reason behind the supernatural phenomenon that plagued both her and Keitaro, as well as better understand the spiritual realm of which she can't naturally sense or see. It's why she tags along despite offering not much more than a ready-to-go method of transportation. Just like Keitaro, she wants to pull her weight in whatever little ways she can. There's a very forward secondary motivation of becoming even closer with Keitaro, but I'll get to that. Trust me. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with liking horror, and I personally wouldn't even consider that alone a red flag. So what's there to hate? As you'll soon see, the issue is how and where she expresses those passions. For starters, Yayoi and Keitaro's coincidental encounter, that wasn't coincidence. She orchestrated their meetup under the guise of tutoring her cousin, only to use that encounter as an excuse to have all three of them visit haunted locations together. This is even more messed up when you consider she knows Keitaro wants nothing to do with the supernatural, yet she's the one that roped him to visit these sites with Yayoi in the first place. And why did she do this? The answer is actually pretty blatant. She loves the sensation of fear, and she loves Keitaro. What better way to get the best of both worlds if you simply merge those two things together? She knows she's taking advantage of Keitaro's spiritual sensitivity and desire to keep her safe, yet she keeps doing it anyway. She can't help but want to experience that sensation with him over and over again. Eiko's obsession with Keitaro is incredibly unhealthy. There's no doubt about that. Honestly, obsession may be an understatement. Eiko is straight up addicted. She surveys and tracks him 24/7, even if knowing where he is at all times saves his life more than once. The principle behind the action is just wrong, especially when he doesn't know. There's a pretty glaring contrast in responsibility as she treats these adventures like it's all a big game to her. It makes you wonder whether she'll really help Keitaro get rid of their curse in the end, because it's something that binds them together. It combines the two things she loves most, and gives them an excuse to go find spirits together. Its removal would most likely be the end of that lifestyle, and I personally can't see her easily letting it go. I totally see a world where she drags out this journey as long as she possibly can, at who else's expense but the one she loves. When Eiko was first introduced, I knew something was off, but I couldn't put my finger on what. Once I really took notice of all the red flags and how it completely recontextualized her relationship with Keitaro, it puts into doubt every little thing she says. It calls into question the legitimacy of what Keitaro tells the audience about her too, because even if she occasionally lets her true self slip, he doesn't fully know what's going on behind the scenes. The thing is, with Keitaro's, and by proxy, Eiko's backstory still shrouded in unknowns. It makes it hard to quantify just how deep that rabbit hole goes. Just as we're tricked into believing she's relatively normal, we're thoroughly reminded that's simply not the case. There are moments of self-reflection where she acknowledges her recklessness and uncertainty to push forward upon recognizing what's really at stake. However, that introspection only ever leads to her accepting the way she is. That's what I mainly mean by love or hate. On one hand, as a main lead, I think she brings a really interesting dynamic to the group, and her over-the-top creepiness is a great fit for the show. And Eiko is some people's type, I guess. At the same time, watching her exploit Keitaro, and to a smaller degree Yayoi, can be aggravating. I'd like to think I'm not reading in too deep here, but again, your true opinion is better gauged through personal experience over second-hand analysis. Something else I like about Dark Gathering's characters is how they mix and combo with one another, whether the exploration of each relationship be healthy or not. So yeah, I want to return to Eiko and Keitaro real quick. These two started off as childhood friends and still remain to be close at the start of the story. A development that shocked me was the romantic relationship that formed between the two. They end up as an actual couple pretty early on into the show. This is shockingly rare, even for romance anime. Knowing what Keitaro doesn't though, it leaves you feeling a bit conflicted. Keitaro really does love Eiko, and you want for him to be happy, but I don't know, man. This isn't meant to be pure Eiko slander. I like the character. I just think taking a closer look at the relationship reveals some pretty intriguing stuff about their characters. Keitaro's curse was something that mentally reigned over him for a long while, and through the support of Eiko, he was able to overcome it. Even if he was unwillingly thrown back into his trauma, he is now using that same curse as motivation to triumph over his fears, forcing himself to push forward because he cares about Yayoi and Eiko. Even though Keitaro's been protecting Eiko his whole life, his later vow to always keep her safe as she goes down her own test of courage is what marks that important shift in his character. In contrast, Eiko's curse is something she took in stride. If anything, she used that curse to lock down a relationship with Keitaro. Throughout that relationship, Eiko claims she wants to repay Keitaro for all the good he's done throughout her life, as she supports him through the fear that's always followed him. There's truth to that statement, but there's a little more she's not being honest about. Eiko views Keitaro as someone dependent on her, someone who's helpless without her support. Not that he doesn't rely on her, but it's concerning when you consider that's the justification for why she approaches the relationship like she does. As much good as she may do for him, through her manipulation, there's this artificial cycle of codependency she's created. It makes you wonder, no matter how genuine that love, just how shallow that relationship really is, as it's founded on pretty selfish reasons. And to take it one step further, she's actively trying to gaslight him into believing he loves the thrill just as much as she does. It almost comes across like a desperate attempt at projection founded from an insecurity that without the supernatural, their relationship has no chance to exist. For better or for worse, Keitaro probably won't ever see this side of Eiko, not unless she really screws up. She has him completely cornered, and all we can do is watch. On a more wholesome note, we turn to Keitaro and Yayoi. I love how they both look up to one another, each wanting to understand the other on their level. Tutoring Yayoi gives Keitaro the opportunity to work on his communication skills, and Keitaro's help ghost hunting gave Yayoi the support she never knew she needed. While Yayoi may have originally preceded this friendship on an assumption of shared curiosity, she's sympathetic to his fear of the supernatural. That's why she offered her support in getting his normal life back. To Yayoi, her friends are just as important as her family. When they're in trouble, she'll do what she can to help them. Understandably, it takes a while for Keitaro to fully put trust in her, but the moment he does, the pair become unstoppable. As Yayoi is able to capture way more spirits than she could ever do alone, and Keitaro is now given the tools to push himself even further than he ever knew he could go. Finally, we have Eiko and Yayoi's pairing. It kinda goes without saying that they want the best for one another, and as cousins, they already have this natural synergy between them. So more often than not, they sorta enable the other's more terrifying habits and or ambitions, with their collective craziness allowing them to come up with some amazingly creative ideas, much to the overwhelming dread of Keitaro. With how close they are, they start off surprisingly clueless of the other's darker lifestyle. Though upon learning of Eiko's obsession and Yayoi's what I can only describe as spirit torture chamber, it's not something that particularly phases either character at all. Considering Yayoi has a lot in common with Eiko, I'm not too alarmed by their mutual indifference. With dedicated focus on such a small cast, it gives the audience lots of time to grow attached to our trio. However, that strength ironically reveals one of the anime's biggest weaknesses. Dark Gathering noticeably lacks supporting characters, making the world within the anime feel uncomfortably small. Towards the end of the season, we're introduced to a plethora of additional cast members, but I feel Dark Gathering would have overall benefited from more early main trio interaction with non-spirits. The few characters we do see, like Keitaro's family, take a pretty heavy backseat and unceremoniously disappear just as we begin to register their existence. That and certain characters' emotional impact on the audience would likely hit a lot harder if we in the main cast spent more than 1 or 2 episodes with them. With how the story is progressing though, I don't see this becoming a long-term issue. One of the last things I wanted to briefly analyze is Dark Gathering's first major arc, because it warps the trajectory of the narrative in a really intriguing way. With Keitaro having landed a new student to tutor, we're introduced to the star-eyed Kamio Ai, a character Oshinoko would shamelessly steal just 1 year later. Due to Keitaro's swift intuition, it doesn't take long for Ai to frantically unload all the paranormal experiences she's had throughout her life. Her curse, her brother's tragic death, the brands on her eyes, all of it. I'm not joking when I say in the span of about 7 minutes, we quite literally learn everything there is to know about her. What's important to know is Ai's someone who suffers from survivor's guilt, and due to the repeated unexplainable incidents that happen around her, fear she'll physically harm even more people she's close to. Those feelings very closely parallel Keitaro's own experiences with the supernatural, which is why he offers his help without hesitation. Keitaro takes Ai to Yayoi for what they assumed to be a simple exorcism, but little did he know the mess they were about to get themselves into. A confrontation with the divine unveils Ai's fate to everyone. She's to be sacrificially betrothed to a possessive and malevolent god the day she turns 20, a burden that has plagued the woman in her lineage for decades. Taunted by the god directly, and wanting to protect their brand new friend. This sends the crew on an unexpected but worthwhile detour. Yayoi theorizes that obtaining the overwhelming power of a god might be what she needs to break Keitaro/Eiko's curse, and finally take down the Spectre of Death. How she plans on achieving this seemingly impossible task is revealed throughout the course of the anime. This arc marks a substantial turning point in Dark Gathering, as our characters are officially in too deep to ever turn back. The vibes of the show shift towards even darker themes, and in pursuit of more power, the stakes for all characters involved escalate tenfold. The introduction of a new central villain really helps the anime break away from the format it previously felt trapped in. with a clear path to their goal. A merging of pre-established plot points start to take place, as Yayoi sets the battlefield for her all-star squad of graduated spirits, with even more happening behind the scenes. That narrative buildup is a large part as to why I feel Dark Gathering only gets better with time. It reinforces just how great the anime's setup is. I wish I had more to say on Ai, but she's not nearly as prominent as you'd think she'd be. It ties into what I said earlier. She sorta pops into existence, then quickly after fades into obscurity. Her introduction is one of the few hiccups in the anime's otherwise superb pacing. I don't mean to end on a negative note, because I really can't overstate just how much Dark Gathering does right. It's a fantastic horror anime with a unique approach to the genre that even non-horror fans can comfortably get into. It has an in-depth story that gets better as it goes on. It has an amazing trio of complex and well-written leads. The list goes on. Dark Gathering has a healthy balance of nearly everything a great show needs. It may falter here and there, but never does it fall flat on its face. To my surprise, there hasn't been a lot of talk about this anime since it's finished airing, despite being received critically very well. I'm on the fence of calling it an underrated gem for that reason, but either way, I think it definitely deserves the extra attention. If this seems like something you'd like, I'd strongly recommend checking out Dark Gathering. The story takes a little while to really pick up steam, but in the name of dating this video with modern slang, please give it some time to cook. In the span of a few episodes, the anime very quickly goes from average to straight up amazing. There's a lot more in Dark Gathering to explore, so I'm overwhelmingly excited to dive further into its world as more content's developed. I just hope my praises don't age like milk. As always, my name is Chyrion, and thanks for watching.